Back on the back, there's 40 or 50 copies of the Forest Service history of the Scapegoat. All right, thank you.
Closer.
Closer. In the 1950s, Lincoln, Montana was reached by driving up a dirt logging road from Ovando, 24 miles. There was no highway across to Missoula. And it was a frontier town, a last outpost for hunters and fishermen, packers and outfitters headed into the wild country to the north. It took special people, self-sufficient, independent outdoorsmen and women, to call Lincoln home. And such was the Garland family when they moved to Lincoln and opened a general store selling chainsaws and clothing and sporting goods, rifles. Cecil Garland.
When I first brought my family to the community of Lincoln, I was told of a great wild country to the north. They told me with awe in their voices of places called Ring Eye, Scotty Creek, Lost Pony, Red Mountain, the East Fork, the North Fork, Parker Lake, Meadow Lake, the Twin Lakes, and an almost unworldly country called Scapegoat and Half Moon Park. I longed to see that country, to know its wild beauty, to catch its fish and to climb its mountains. Unusually wonderful it was then, when the time came to pack our camp and move away from the roads that led back to the world we called civilization. We camped that first night on a small bench above Ring Eye Falls. Taking down our tent from the old frame the pack rats were using as a home, we made a secure camp, fed our stock, cooked supper, and turned our complete thoughts to our whereabouts. We took from our duffel an old elk reed bugle, and as the chair ale fell with the sun, we shattered the calm of that September evening with a blast from our elk call. Then, almost as by magic, above us on Red Mountain, a bull elk bugled his challenge that this was his territory. And then, over on Webb Lake Hill, still another bull called back that this was his home. All through the frosty fall air, the calls echoed back and forth, and I knew that I had found wilderness. I would not sleep that night, for I was trying to convince myself that this was really so, that there really was wild country like this left, and that somehow I had found it. But all was not at peace in my heart that night, for I knew that someday, for some unknown reason, man would try to destroy this country as man had altered and destroyed before. That night I made a vow that whatever the cost, for whatever reason, I would do all that I could to keep this country as wild as I had found it.
Sometime later, the head of the U.S. Forest Service in Missoula, Regional Forester Boyd Rasmussen, formulated major plans to build an extensive network of federal roads through the wild country north of Lincoln, including a 75-mile highway along the Continental Divide. Hunters, anglers, horsebackers from Lincoln formed the Lincoln Backcountry Protective Association. Cecil Garland was then elected president. And a frustrated regional forester, learning of opposition, asked his staff for background on the opposition. And the assistant regional forester replied,
Mr. Garland, he is an intelligent, energetic individual of 27. His formal education consists of elementary grades and 4 years at an agricultural vocational school in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. He quotes authors and recites statistics from memory. He has memorized his letter to you of the wrongs on the regional plans and repeats it verbatim starting by describing the circumstances that led to the Declaration of Independence, and compares it with the situation on the northern region of the U.S. Forest Service. You bet we will hear further from Mr. Garland.
The regional forester issued orders to immediately stake and bulldoze the first new road to Heart Lake and deep into the Lincoln backcountry. Not all in the Forest Service agreed, including a young forest engineer who actually staked the road. After work, the young engineer went to Garland's store to explain the urgency of the situation. In desperation, Cecil placed call after call to Washington, D.C. His pleas were heard by the newly elected Republican congressman from eastern Montana, James Batten. Batten then called Regional Forester Rasmussen, asking him for 10 days, to hold off for 10 days so he could look into the situation. Rasmussen said no, he didn't have 10 days. The bulldozers were ready to roll. Batten replied,
By God, you better give me 10 days.
Congressman Batten later, after looking into it, agreed to sponsor a bill asking Garland for a map showing the area they felt should be protected as wilderness. Garland picked up the phone and called Lloyd Reisman, a seasonal worker at the Lincoln Ranger District.
Lloyd, this is Cecil. Get over here and bring your maps. Well, I set a jar of whiskey out from the Smokies. The further we got into that bottle, the easier it was to draw the boundaries.
The regional forester was not pleased.
What business does a store owner from Lincoln, Montana have drawing a wilderness boundary? Do you know what this means? The Forest Service is losing control.
True to his word, Congressman Batten introduced the Lincoln Scapegoat Wilderness Act based on maps drafted in Lincoln. Hearings were held in Montana and in our nation's capital. Many Blackfoot Valley residents attended and spoke eloquently at the hearings. Pat and Ellen Mulcair had to break trail through an early season snowstorm to get to the hearings in Great Falls. Montana elk hunters led by Don Aldrich and elected officials, Republican and Democrat alike, worked together for 8 years to pass the Lincoln Backcountry Scapegoat Wilderness Act. One Blackfoot Valley resident who traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. to testify for preserving this wild land was the legendary outfitter and dude rancher from Ovando known as Hobnail Tom Edwards.
I am Tom Edwards. I have owned and operated the Whitetail Ranch continuously since 1937. For over a quarter of a century, I have virtually lived in the Lincoln Scapegoat. Into this land of spiritual strength, I have been privileged to guide over the years literally thousands of people, the young, the old, and the great, and some of not too big a stature, such as myself. I have harvested a resource of the forest of vast importance. No one word will suffice, but to explain this resource, let us call it the hush of the land. People who have traveled into this wild mountain land are having a very deep, soul-satisfying experience in finding their relationship with living things and the eternal mountains. A Montana way of life, a fulfillment of knowing themselves better. It's a feeling of joining with the ancients and the prophets of the Bible who ventured into the wilderness and saw creation. I lift mine eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my strength. The proposed management plan of the Forest Service states that their plan will aid the hunter and the horsepacker. They sincerely believe that the little islands of wilderness can be kept sullied until traffic and roads drive to the very wall of the Scapegoat Mountain. Every one of us who travels this wonderful backcountry knows that a highway up the Continental Divide into the Danaher, up White Creek, Cabin Creek, the North Fork, simply means the end. The Lincoln Scapegoat Wilderness, magic to people for so many years, will be gone forever. The hush will depart from the land forever.
The hearings were a disaster for the regional foresters' plans. This allowed Helena Forest Supervisor Bob Morgan along with the supervisors of the Lewis and Clark and Lolo Forest, to convince the regional forester to drop federal road plans and support the Lincoln Backcountry for Wilderness. The U.S. Senate passed the Lincoln Scapegoat Wilderness bill, only to have it remain mired in the House of Representatives. There, the powerful committee chairman, Congressman Wayne Aspinall of Colorado, refused to let the bill out of committee for a floor vote. Back in D.C., Cecil Garland encountered Congressman Aspinall, who flatly told him,
"You may as well go back to Montana, son. Your bill will never get out of my committee. It's dead."
In desperation, Garland poured out his story to Senator Mike Mansfield, the former Butte miner, now Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate. Senator Mansfield listened quietly to Cecil's story and then said,
"Cece, you go back to Montana and tell the people there that we will get this bill passed. There will be something that Congressman Aspinall wants, and when that happens, we'll be there. I'll talk to Senator Metcalf, and the people of Montana will get their Lincoln Scapegoat Wilderness."
Mike Mansfield kept his promise. Congressman Aspinall found the Colorado water legislation he needed blocked until he relinquished his hold on the Montana bill. 40 years ago, in 1972, the Lincoln Scapegoat became the first citizen-initiated wilderness in America. Now, this is a true story of American democracy. It's a story of ordinary people and the wild lands that they cherished. And the story of the Scapegoat Wilderness should be told and retold around Montana campfires, so that long into the future, so that these young people, new generations, understand that ordinary people acting with courage and conviction can really make a difference. That ordinary people can leave a legacy for all. Pass it on. Okay. All right.
What's that?
Well, next I'd like to introduce 3 sixth graders from the Lincoln Elementary School who are going to talk about what the Scapegoat Wilderness means to them today growing up in Lincoln. Are you ready? All right, you can grab the other mic. Cade Creech, Hannah Heath, and Sage Camp. And they're 6th graders and 5th graders from Lincoln Elementary School. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kate Creech, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts about the Scapegoat Wilderness. Why the wilderness is important to me. The wilderness is important to me because it's a good place to go and get away from everyone and everything. It's also important for the hunting opportunities it gives us. Elk, deer, bears, wolves, moose, and other animals live in the wilderness. Guided hunting trips draw people from other states to come and hunt. I am 11 years old, and I can't wait till I'm old enough to hunt. I only have 1 more year to wait. I wish there was more wilderness. I hope when I'm older there will still be the same amount of wilderness there is today. Having the wilderness around us is a tradition that I'd like to keep. This is the reason why wilderness is important to me.
Hi, my name's Hannah. Thank you for having us here today. These are my thoughts about the scapegoat, why the wilderness is important. I think the wilderness is important because it has so much to do with how we live every day here in Montana. One of those important things is trees. Trees help us breathe because they make air for us. Trees also help us stay warm in winter and in colder climates because they make firewood. Animals are part of the wilderness. They live and are protected there. Animals aren't just there to look pretty, they help us. They are also food. If all the animals were to disappear, we would have nothing left to eat but vegetables, fruit, and soup. Animals need shelter, food, and water just like we do. If there wasn't water, nothing would grow, nothing would survive. That is why I think the wilderness is important.
Hi, I'm Sage Camps. Tan Christensen wrote this poem. He couldn't be here today, but I'll read it to you. The value of the wilderness. Peaceful land with beautiful plants, colorful songbirds singing, rabbits racing, graceful eagles flying, bees buzzing, hummingbirds humming, a fish leaping out of the water. Waterfalls splash while sheep and deer graze. Frogs leap across lily pads and mice enjoy an owl-free day. Kids explore places they've never been before, while turtles dry themselves on logs and bears eat berries. The great night sky of the stars above and the wild pine trees air. By Tan Christensen.
All right, thank you very much. That was great. Put a hand for the Lincoln Elementary School.